guys, before we jump into the episode, I've got some exciting news to share. Our brand new website has just been launched and is live at paulbegleypodcast.com. This is now your one-stop hub for everything podcast related. So instead of scouring all over the internet looking for links to the show, you can stream every episode, watch our latest YouTube videos, check out our guest directory to see who's been on the show, and even read our brand new blog for extra content. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review right on the site. There's no login hassle needed to do this. Everything's right there. It's easy to access, mobile friendly, and it's built for you. So while you're listening today, take a second to check it out. paulbegleypodcast.com. Now back to the show.
All right, guys, welcome for another powerful podcast. And this one is called Cult Classics. Well, we're doing a series of cult classics, and this one is on the Heaven's Gate classic. Joining me, of course, today is Paul Jr. and BC Begley. So we got Paul Begley. Okay, we got Paul Begley, we got Pastor Paul Begley, and we got BC Begley, which is Bart Begley, of course. And you can see his channel on YouTube if you go to BC Begley channel. It's awesome. But anyway, we're glad you guys are all here today. How you guys doing?
Oh, great. This is good. We've done quite a bit of research on this. Bart even made a documentary for this, so we'll get into that. But this is, I feel like we could do a whole series just on this cult alone. This guy, some real ate-up stuff we're going to get into.
Right. Folks, for those of you who are just, look, we're going to talk about a cult that happened in the 90s, but actually it started way before that. A guy who really got confused. It wasn't just him. It wasn't just Marshall Applewhite, but the woman he met named Bonnie Nettles. And Bart Begley has put together about an 8-minute documentary on this, which is phenomenal. BC Begley did. And then we got a lot of other clips and things to show. So, Drew, take it away. Tell us what we're going to do here.
Sure. Well, I think we'll just start it. So, Bart, we'll probably watch the whole thing throughout the course of the show here today, but we'll start here with what you've put together for us. About an 8-minute documentary. Again, you can find it on BC Begley's YouTube channel, also Rumble too, everywhere. But we'll start it here and kind of get the conversation going for it.
Marshall Applewhite Jr., born in 1931 in Texas, came from a deeply religious Presbyterian family. The son of a minister, he was raised with strong Christian values. But as he matured, he began to struggle with his identity, particularly his sexuality and his purpose in life. Applewhite pursued a career in music, eventually becoming a college professor. However, by the early 1970s, his life had become unstable. He lost his teaching job amid allegations of an inappropriate relationship with a male student. Then his marriage ended, and he was emotionally adrift. During this time, he met a nurse named Bonnie Nettles, a devout believer in astrology and New Age teachings. Their meeting in 1972 would mark the genesis of what would become one of the most infamous UFO cults in American history.
I'm going to stop it right there because there's a lot to unpack with just that small introduction really to the whole story, Bart, that you put together. The fact that this guy, came up from devout Christian family, first of all, has major influence on his direction and, the teachings that he's already learned in life. And then you go ahead and you mix that in there with homosexuality, which when did you say he was born? In the 50s? 30s?
Yeah. He was born in the 50s and he was in college in the 70s, I believe.
Yeah. So you mix those two things together, and during that time period, those things do not mix at all. So he's already hiding, his sexuality, he's struggling with it, trying to convince himself that he's not his whole life anyway. So I don't think he was really ever in a good place, to be honest with you. What do you think, Pastor?
Well, yeah, and his sexuality is in a direct confliction with his Christian upbringing. So he's already, really conflicted. And then you throw in the fact that he was born in the 50s, different era, but he goes to college in the 70s, the flower children, okay, and expression, and the whole movement of the 60s of free love, and and all this rebellion against the government because of the Vietnam War. And so people were basically throwing traditional values to the corner and wanting to be more freer and express themselves in a different way. And I'm sure drugs came into play at some point here. I don't know where. I'm not sure. We have to watch a little closer. Maybe not. But certainly the conflicting of his upbringing to where he was, and the sexuality thing, which was in direct contrast to his Christian teachings. This guy is really a wreck internally. He's a wreck. And so he's probably looking for somewhere else. I mean, he's married, right? Yet he's got this other hidden identity that he's struggling with. So this guy's already pretty conflicted.
Yeah, and being gay in the 70s was really taboo and was really hard. And it might have been hippies and flower children in the 70s, but there was still a huge old school conservative, a lot of people.
The culture was still old school.
The culture was still, John Wayne at that moment. So he was a Methodist raised, and then he's gay. So he's conflicted with his faith, and in a time where you couldn't really openly come out and say you were gay.
Right.
So it's just his mental health is just, by the time he's in college, he's a wreck. Humpty Dumpty has fell off the wall.
Right. Yeah. So let me jump right back to that, and we'll watch a little bit more here.
Bonnie Lou Nettles was a mother and a nurse who had developed a strong interest in spiritualism and prophecy. She believed that she was receiving messages from extraterrestrial beings. When she met Applewhite, reportedly during a hospital stay, she claimed that spirits had told her that they had a divine mission together. Applewhite, who was seeking meaning and direction, quickly grew close to Nettles, seeing her as a guiding force. Nettles told Applewhite that he was a prophet, and that they were destined to fulfill a religious mission on Earth. The two adopted the names T and Do, T for Nettles, and Do for Applewhite, which referenced the musical scale and presented themselves as metaphysical teachers from the next level, which was a higher evolutionary plane beyond human life.
All right, so there's just so much going on.
She didn't do him any favors. You know what I mean? So, so first off,
are you serious? You think this was like a collision course, an atomic bomb about ready to go off into this guy? This guy was already in a mess,
right? And and she's a nurse. She's a married nurse who leaves her husband to follow the prophet. She thinks this guy's Paul Jr. could explain it better about how they meet.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things to unpack in that short segment too. So, and we mentioned that when he was in college. So now they met in the hospital, where Bonnie was the nurse. But before that, even, I don't really know why he was in the hospital at this point, but before that, he had actually lost his job. He was a music professor at a university, and then lost his job, maybe because of he was having an affair with a male graduate student at the university. So probably, more than likely, they fired him because he was gay, right? So again, he's internalizing all of these different things. It's not okay to be gay at this time in the culture and the society.
Divorce, right?
Yeah, that led to divorce.
Now he's getting divorced.
So he's a wreck. He's a wreck. he goes to the hospital and he meets this, this woman,
whacked out nurse.
Yeah, and well,
Yeah.
she thinks he's a prophet,
Yeah. Yeah,
And
she had a vision, allegedly, that was given to her about a man of his stature and physical features that led her to believe that he was a prophet. And so then when she came across him in the hospital, she was automatically drawn to him because that was what she saw in her vision. So,
enough so to leave her husband and follow this man, and quit her nursing job, like gave up her whole life because she was for sure this guy was the prophet in her vision.
Right.
And they took on the identity of the two witnesses from the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Which you talk about a twisted. The two witnesses in the book of Revelation, they show up because the third temple's been built. And the world is looking for the Messiah. Okay. Whether it's the Mahdi or the Messiah or, some spirit or some ET, because she's a UFO, and she's into New Age, right? So they're looking for some kind of savior of some sort. The book of Revelation is the two witnesses are preaching in the streets, telling the world, look, no. This Antichrist guy or this world leader that's popped up, he's not the one. Jesus is the one, So that's what they do in the book of Revelation. But these two are saying that they're the two witnesses.
And she also gave them names based off a musical scale, T and Do, because he was a music professor or a music teacher, right? He got fired from music for maybe an inappropriate relationship with a male student.
That definitely had to be
combining the fact that he was a music teacher into the religion.
Yeah.
By naming themselves this, and they're claiming to be the two witnesses of Revelation. So this is like this is now snowballing.
Yeah.
And she's not helping his mental health at all by propping him up as a prophet. You know what I mean?
Right. But I mean, but at the same time, if you think about his psychology at that moment, right? He's still struggling. He had an affair with a man. His wife left him. They have 2 kids. His wife left him, took both his kids. He got fired from his job. And then this is the only person paying him any attention, and so much attention that he's almost Messiah,
He's a Messiah. He's messianic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it probably caught him off a little. I bet it caught him off guard a bit.
Oh, I'm sure.
And he probably just ran with it, or something, or sat and pondered it. And he's already in this messed up state. And now she's planted this wild seed in his head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But this thing goes past just the two of them.
Oh.
Yeah. Let's see what else.
Let's jump back in here.
Together, they formed a philosophy that blended Christian millennialism, New Age mysticism, and science fiction. They taught that Earth was about to be recycled, and that the only way to escape destruction was to leave the planet and ascend to the next level, aboard a spacecraft.
Sorry, that's my fault. I'm clicking around.
Well, just pause it there, because...
Okay.
They believed that they were...
Yep. Did you hear what all he mixed into his religion?
Yeah, what was it, BC, again?
It was UFOlogy, Christianity, and New Age mysticism.
Yeah.
All wrapped into one. And I was telling Paul off camera that this isn't even really a good idea. It's not even a good, it's not like a Jim Jones idea where he was borderlining the Bible. These people are like, it's not even as good as Ancient Aliens. This is like a wild mix of everything. And then you throw in their names as a musical scale, and the fact that they're the two witnesses and that they're really just entities into a vehicle, right? Vehicle is just their body. It's on next level religion. It's not even really believable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the theory is so bad that it would not. Nobody would. If you wrote a book with this being the theory, nobody would publish it.
No,
It's awful.
No,
I mean, really. David Koresh had a better story.
Yeah, a lot better story.
Jim
actually,
Jones had a way better story.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying their stories were right. I'm saying if you were trying to create some kind of new religion thing,
if you were trying to convince Pastor Paul,
or anybody, anybody, that's why.
Yeah, it's a lot more believable.
That's why there's only 38 followers at the end.
Yeah,
I mean, it's because it is too crazy. But the incredible thing is,
these people are intelligent.
They are. Yeah, that's the thing. These are not people that just stumbled and bumbled and fumbled their way in.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't just drag them off the street. These are highly educated, very intelligent people.
Most of them worked in the tech sector in the 90s, which you had to be highly intelligent to be on the cutting edge, working in the technology, sector in the 90s. Yeah, .com boost in the 90s. So these people
they mixed what you said, millennialism from the Bible, which is of the end time return of Christ and the 1,000-year reign on the earth. Okay. Right. They took that one concept. Then they went over and grabbed UFOlogy, but they grabbed the part of UFOlogy about catching a ride on a spaceship with an ET, I think.
I think it's like a ripoff of Ancient Aliens. It's like we were here.
It's before Ancient Aliens
else. And we were planted here, and they're trying to get back to that.
Yeah, which is a rip-off, which is really before.
But they were before Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, they're before Ancient, so they're kind of floating this idea first. But they're mixing it with millennialism, and then they're mixing it with something else. With what?
With New Age mysticism.
Yeah.
Which I don't even see how any of these three things fit. These are three separate thoughts trying to collectively create something out of it.
And then they're mixing it with Christianity because they're the two witnesses. And they're naming themselves. They're naming themselves from T and Do from a musical scale.
Which that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't even fit in anywhere.
Where's
Bart and I were talking about that.
If they're T and Do, where's Fa Sol La Tito? Where's the first three dudes?
Well, the other cult members do give themselves names, but it's not based on a musical scale. They're just wild names.
That just
it ends with a ODY. So I think they took their first Earth vehicle given government name, right? And I think they took 3 letters from their first name and just kept 3 letters and then ended it with ODY, which makes them part of the family of Heaven's Gate, which now they're in a cult. Right. So now we have our own, given family name to follow whatever belief system that we have, which is not believable. And Bart and I were talking about this as well. It's hard to try to understand. That's why I'm saying we could probably do 5 podcasts on this because it's hard to understand, the psychology, but also the time frame when this is happening, because there wasn't internet. You can't just fact check things that somebody's feeding you. Also, T and Do also blended the monastery lifestyle and you'll see, because we'll show some of the exit interviews, which is last interviews of the participants before they committed suicide, which again on their website, which is still active, and I'll show you. They took a position against suicide. Ultimately, that's what they ended up doing. So
here they are. They take a position on their website that suicide's bad, but the final act of this group is their leader, Applewhite, and 38 of his followers all commit suicide at once. This is the most incredible reasoning, and it was to catch a ride on a Hale-Bopp comet. I mean, some kind of ET space vehicle. I mean, this is the wildest story on the face of the earth, and yet these 39 people commit suicide. I mean, this is where we're going. For those of you who don't know, It's an incredible, and how they do the suicide and what they were wearing and what they had to do.
Right.
We'll see more of this right now.
Well, so I mean, before we jump back to the documentary, we're on this topic anyway. So, for anybody interested, I wouldn't recommend that you get too far into it unless you're just like curious. How can these people get convinced like this? The website. This is the actual cult's website, heavensgate.com. It's still active. It's still being run by, I think, 2 members that didn't participate in the mass suicide event. So again, look, Hail Bob brings closure to Heaven's Gate. And then it goes ahead and talks about Hail Bob was a companion or not is irrelevant from our perspective. However, its arrival is joyously very significant to us at Heaven's Gate, right? They talk about this Hail Bob comet, and then I just wanted to click on that. Our position against suicide. Okay. Let's see. We know that this is only while we are in these physical vehicles or bodies that we can learn the lessons needed to complete our own individual transition, as well as to complete our task of offering the kingdom of heaven to this civilization one last time. We take good care of our vehicles so we can function well for us in this task, and we try to protect them from any harm. We fully desire, expect, and look forward to boarding a spacecraft from the next level very soon in our physical bodies. All right, so that's the language they use when they're talking about we're getting ready to kill ourselves.
Yeah.
Right, we're gonna go join the next level and leave our physical bodies behind, or our vehicles, right? So that, and if I'm just trying to scan through this to see while we're looking at it and see what they actually said. Okay, at the very bottom it says the true meaning of suicide is to turn against the next level when it is being offered. In these last days, we are focused on 2 primary tasks. One, of making a last attempt at telling the truth about how the next level may be entered, our last effort at offering to individuals of this civilization to the way to avoid suicide. And 2, taking advantage of the rare opportunity that we have each day to work individually on our personal overcoming and change in preparation for entering the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so I don't even know what that means. What did I even just read, honestly? But
so I think basically it wasn't suicide when they did it because they were catching a ride on a spaceship behind a comet.
Right, to go to the next level.
They were just exiting their vehicles and catching a ride. But if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to exit your vehicle and catch a ride on the next Hale-Bopp comet, you need to be not committing suicide on Earth. You need to be working to prepare yourself for the kingdom of heaven. So they're against suicide.
Okay.
They didn't consider what they did suicide.
They considered what they did is entering into Heaven's Gate.
Yep. They considered going to what they did was going to heaven. They didn't even commit suicide.
Yeah.
But I'm curious.
But I mean, it's really conflicting.
It's very conflicting. But I'm curious how, like, okay, so if that is this, like, let's go there. If that is the stance and that's the position, whose idea was it to say, in order to catch that ship as it comes by, we all need to be dead first?
It's got to be Applewhite.
That's the Applewhite.
What is that?
and that's what I'm saying. Where in the world does this guy get this? That first of all, you start some cult, and the whole time you never bring up Hale-Bopp Comet. Okay, it's after Bonnie Nettles dies, and he's disillusioned, and all of a sudden there's a comet coming that he gets a 2-year ideal that, oh, I know what we do. We need to all just die and catch this thing on the way out the door. That's Heaven's Gate.
That's what I told Paul on before we went on. I was like, how is this guy convincing everybody when no one even knew about Hale-Bopp Comet?
Yeah.
You know, the majority of us didn't until it got
like 2 years before, and it's after Bonnie Nettles dies. But he does some kind of preaching of some kind of spiritual brainwashing, because look at these 2 cats right here. I mean, listen to what this dude says.
Yeah, let's go back.
This is their exit, what they call exit interview. This is their final statements before they kill themselves to catch the Hale-Bopp Comet. Are you serious?
Yeah.
I mean, are you serious?
we'll go to those, but this is back to BC's documentary here. Just
okay.
Some more context. But yeah, we'll listen to their interviews, which are on YouTube.
Okay.
So.
Let's go back to the documentary.
Extraterrestrial beings trapped in human bodies, sent to guide others toward salvation. Over time, they refined this belief into a full religious doctrine. Humans were trapped in a corrupted world, and only those who followed T and Do's teachings could evolve into perfected alien beings and board a spaceship to take them to paradise. By the mid 1970s, T and Do began followers across the United States, often holding public meetings in churches and college campuses. They told their audiences that two witnesses, prophesied in the book of Revelation, were currently on Earth, referring to themselves, and that a spaceship would soon arrive to take believers to the next level. Surprisingly, their message resonated with many, especially young adults disillusioned with traditional religion, the Vietnam War, and mainstream society. Around the year 1975, they convinced over 20 people in Oregon to abandon their families and possessions and to join the group. Media attention spiked when those people seemingly vanished overnight. The group, now mobile, adopted a nomadic lifestyle, living under strict ascetic rules and awaiting contact with alien intelligence. For the next several years, the group, now known as Heaven's Gate, largely disappeared from public view. Members lived in obscurity, often in campgrounds or modest rented homes, cut off from the outside world. Applewhite and Nettles imposed increasingly rigid rules: no sex, no alcohol, no personal relationships. Members took on new names, wore identical clothes, and suppressed all individuality. They viewed the human body as a vehicle and Earth as a prison. Their goal was to transcend this existence and to be exited to the next level, shedding their human containers. Despite these extreme beliefs, members were intelligent, well-mannered, and by all accounts, voluntarily committed to the cause. In 1985, Bonnie Nettles died of liver cancer. This was a pivotal.
We'll stop there because I mean, it's because we were kind of touching on all that stuff, but Bart, your documentary summarizes it really well, right?
Yeah, it does.
You know, you were blending all of these different elements together, and then you're removing people. So it's really difficult to think because you're getting ready to touch on when Bonnie actually dies. So she wasn't part of the mass suicide at the end because she actually died. But what happened there, though, before we continue, a little bit more context about this. The whole religion almost fell apart when she did die because I don't think T and Do Re Mi, wherever they were, thought about, you know, what would happen if one of us died because they were presenting themselves as the two witnesses and
The
these
book of Revelation.
powerful beings and elders essentially to their followers. So when she did die, Applewhite had to think of a clever way or clever enough to convince his followers, you know, well, she didn't die from cancer, which she did die from cancer. Her body actually just wasn't able to hold in her spirit any longer, and she essentially combusted from the inside. So I don't really know how he was able to convey that and get that across to people and they believed him. But and then even before then, so he was doing some soul searching, which he was his whole life, but she passes away. He has all the members from the group go back to their families and go home, leave.
I think he was quitting at that moment. This whole dream died.
Yeah.
And so then he sends them all home.
He sends them all home. They hadn't been home to see their a lot of their families thought that they were dead because they hadn't seen them or heard from them.
No contact with them
over a decade.
Years. Yeah.
Yeah. 20 years, 10, 20 years. They go home, and then actually all of them, except for I think one, come back to the monastery, the classroom, the cult. which was interesting. And then when they come back, now he's presenting himself as he is Jesus Christ, and Bonnie was the father. So now we're not. I mean, we're still referred to as T and Do, but you should view us as, essentially Jesus and
yeah.
the
So
Father.
she was the father, and I'm the Son of God, and we present ourselves as two witnesses. But his shift was, we're still the two witnesses. The Father went back. I'm here. I'm the Messiah, and I'm going to lead you through heaven's gate. I mean, that was the new story, right? That's the new story.
Yeah, that's the new story right there. When it almost fell apart after she passes away.
There's a scripture I think you should show, because I think it kind of helps understand that Jesus said in Matthew 24, I'll just say verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Except because they mentioned these are the last days. Okay, you read that earlier. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Okay, which you could twist that and say, look, with the days, we got to end our lives, or nobody's going to make it. Somebody's got to see the light to catch the hell bob. Okay. So then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not, Jesus said, for there shall arise false Christ and false prophets, and they shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. And Jesus does. He does many times. He talks about false Christ and false prophets in the last days, deceiving people with some type of spirit of deception or disillusion, or a strong delusion that the Apostle Paul talks about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So this is just another, many false Christ and false prophets will rise in these latter days. And these people are definitely false, but they've deceived themselves. It's not just that they deceived the others. They really were deceived, in my opinion. Yeah. And now he's got a new story because she died and sent everybody home, and then he summons them all back.
So one of the things, first we got to correct real quick. I just looked it up. Applewhite was born in 1931.
Okay.
In Texas. Okay. So let's timeline this. So he's born in 31. So she dies, Nettles dies in 86. So Applewhite is 57 at this time.
Okay. And
everything falls apart. Now, Applewhite, the mass suicide is in 1997.
Right.
So this last 11 years after she dies is way more dramatic and different than the first 20 of their cult.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Because him and her met probably in the late 50s or early 60s, right? And so they've established this cult, and now we're in 86 and she dies. So it seems like, and like Paul said, he sent them all home. Right. And then they all come back, and it seems like, and then there's a random Hellbop comment that comes around. It seems like this was the slide, the fast, rapid descent was after she died, and things started to get changed, and the religion, everything started to get changed.
Which that makes sense too. Because regardless of how crazy T and Do were together, they probably balanced each other out to keep the cult from leading to what ultimately happened. Right. So when you had, you'll see like in the, Jonestown, right? There's one leader. And like all of these, I'm sure we're going to do different episodes covering different cults like this. But as you see, like when there's just one leader of a cult, a lot of it always usually ends up with everybody has to give their wife to him. Nobody else can have sex at all except for the leader. And then we all just need to go ahead and kill ourselves. Like it's wild, but it's really hard to understand. Yeah.
That pattern does seem to work in several different cults that have come up, one leader, the separating of the wives from the husband, the sexual abstinence that he imposes on everyone except himself and the women he's taking. This characteristic is part of the mind control and body control and soul control.
Yeah.
They break down the family and they have some convoluted. I mean, Koresh did it. Jones did it. In some ways, Applewhite did it. He did it in a way of saying that everybody has to refrain.
Yeah.
Also, there's just this convoluted isolation. That's another thing. Isolation.
Yeah.
Okay. We got to go hide. We got to go. Charlie Manson. I'll give you another one. Believe it or not, he slept with all the women in the harem kind of group, except the guys that were there. Everybody had everything was about Charlie and the women. He had control of everybody.
Mm.
I mean, ultimately, Charlie Manson was a cult leader. I mean, to be honest, in a weird, crazy way.
Oh yeah,
we see the same characteristics being carried out.
Yes, they did abstain. That was part of their thing. No sex, but also I think Bart and I were talking about this too. It might go back to him, always fighting with his confliction of homosexuality.
Yeah, I think so.
Or he was trying not to act on those impulses, which also is probably why they sort of resorted to a monastery monk style living.
Right.
Is because they were trying to strip these things away, and desires and wants and lusts and things like that.
Right.
But ultimately that ended up leading to, there was a male member of the cult that got close to Applewhite, and he had ended up telling, I forgot his name. I'm sorry. I really wish I probably should have looked that up before we started to go with this. But anyway, he told the member, I think my vehicle is becoming attracted to your vehicle, and I don't think that we should be working as close together as we are. Meaning he wanted to have sex with this guy.
Right.
So what his conclusion was, well, I'm going to go ahead and castrate myself to get rid of my desires. So
are you saying the partner did? I mean, or the
no, Applewhite. That was Applewhite's
Applewhite did?
Yes, he did. He did, and he was able to convince 7 other men in the cult to also castrate themselves. Yeah.
So now we're going. So this is still part of that sexual confliction.
It is, yeah.
From his childhood or from his adolescent days, and when he's getting married, and his religious teachings that was saying no, and so now here we are, 30 years later, and he's castrating himself and 7 other guys with him.
Yep. And
this is another way to control people. I mean, wow.
Oh, for sure. And one of the female members of the cult was a nurse, not Bonnie, but another member. And she actually performed the first castration of one of the male members. They were actually all kind of competing to see who was going to go first, just to kind of prove their allegiance, I guess. Yeah. And she ended up doing it. Applewhite actually put a sign on it. They set up a little castration room, and he put a sign over the door that said Mexico. So that way, if it ever got caught, they could say, no, we had the procedure performed in Mexico and not technically be lying.
At that time, it was illegal. Well, it was illegal for her to do a surgery anyway.
There were so many better ideas to do.
This is the worst idea. You think about it, if you were setting up a cult, this is the worst approach.
This is really bad.
Face of the earth.
There were so many better ideas to do on that random Saturday than sit around and castrate yourselves with your friends, like a fantasy football league or.
That would have been way more beneficial.
NASCAR race on Saturday, golfing, join a bowling league. I mean, there were so many other ways to create a cult following than the Heaven's Gate castration cult.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way. And yet they got 38 people going with them. I mean, that's the thing about it. But yet they had more people showing up at their meeting, than Joe Biden had in some of his rallies when he was running for president. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me how bad some of this stuff gets. I mean,
All right, let's.
Remember when Joe Biden could only get 20 people at some kind of town hall, and he was president of the United States?
And those were probably
Applewhite was pulling more than
was pulling. I'm just saying. It's bad. Let's continue, folks. Hang with us because you won't believe what else we got to show you. I mean, you don't even know how bad this gets.
All right, well, let's jump back in.
Moment for the group, as it directly contradicted their belief that both T and Doe would ascend together physically. Applewhite was devastated, but rather than abandon the theology, he reframed her death as part of a divine plan, claiming that she had simply returned to the next level, ahead of the group. Her passing solidified Applewhite's role as the sole spiritual leader of the group, and he increasingly emphasized that death was necessary to reach salvation. His teachings took on a darker tone, and the group became more isolated. Over the next decade, Applewhite maintained control over a loyal core of followers, refining his apocalyptic vision. The cult had developed a significant presence online, one of the first religious movements to do so. Heaven's Gate launched a website and offered spiritual teachings and digital services. Members supported themselves by designing websites under the name Higher Source. At the same time, Applewhite began warning of an impending cosmic event that would mark the end of human civilization. He believed a spacecraft trailing the Hale-Bopp comet, discovered in 1995 and set to pass near Earth in 1997, was the signal that they had been waiting for. This comet, he declared, was the marker of their departure. In early 1997, Applewhite announced to his followers that the time had come. He claimed that a spaceship behind the Hale-Bopp comet would collect their souls if they exited their earthly vehicles. They began preparing meticulously for mass ascension. On March 22nd through the 26th, 1997, in a rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, 39 members of Heaven's Gate, including Applewhite, committed mass suicide by ingesting a drug mixed with applesauce and alcohol, followed by suffocation with plastic bags. They wore matching black clothes, Nike sneakers, and armbands labeled Heaven's Gate Away Team. Their bodies were found days later, neatly laid out on bunk beds with purple shrouds over their faces. The Heaven's Gate suicide shocked the world. News outlets swarmed the mansion, and the internet buzzed with discussion of this strange and tragic group. Some saw them as cult victims, others as lost souls manipulated by a charismatic leader. Investigations revealed that the group had filmed farewell videos in which members calmly explained their decisions and expressed joy about the upcoming journey. Their deaths were not frenzied or fearful. They believed with certainty that they were going to a better place. For Applewhite, this was the final step in a decades-long mission of spiritual transformation and escape from a world that he saw as impure. In the years since, Heaven's Gate has become a symbol of the dangers of cultic thinking and extreme belief systems. It remains one of the most well-known examples of mass suicide tied to religious ideology in American history. The group's writings and website remain online, preserved by surviving members who did not join the final act. Applewhite's legacy is one of tragedy, a man haunted by identity struggles, swept into apocalyptic visions, who inspired deep loyalty and led his followers to their deaths. Bonnie Nettles' early influence on him was pivotal. Her belief in his prophetic destiny fueled a movement that would blend science fiction, religious zeal, and existential despair into a uniquely American tale of belief and catastrophe.
Wow.
Wow, what a great documentary. And that's at your channel, right? At BC.
Yeah, that's it.
So if you want to go there, people, go to Bart's channel, check that out. Not only that one, but other work he's done. Really good work. That's a great documentary, a great summary of the whole thing, really. Did you see his eyes at the end, though? I mean, do you guys see that he's possessed with this? I think this is an important part.
Oh, for sure, he's possessed.
He's possessed. I mean, some would say he's psychologically just, he's psychotic, or he's social. He's become sociopathic. I don't know. We give it all kinds of clinical diagnosis. Well, I'm just going to tell you flat out, this dude's possessed. Okay, I mean, he's got some kind of, and he's able to implement it on the others. But Paul, while this was going on, guys, I pulled up a scripture real quick. If you want to pull it up there, this is Luke chapter 21. 2 verses. Luke chapter 21, verse 25. Talked about they were looking for a sign. Remember, he said when the Hale-Bopp comet came into play in 1995, he said this is the sign that they were looking for. Well, Jesus said, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. And upon the earth will be distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and the waves will be roaring. So all these things are happening, right? Men's hearts will fail them for fear, for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Now, if you would have read on, it would have said, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. If he would have read on, he would have understood that these signs in the heavens were really for the coming Messiah.
Right.
But if you just read these 2 verses, he could have easily just twisted those and said, see, guys, there's our sign. It's in the star. It's coming. This is the gate we've been waiting for. We've been preparing for. We've been searching for. Heaven's gate is coming. We're going to catch the ride into the next portal. We're going to go into the next portal. And he convinced these people to do this.
Yeah, and I'm curious where he even got the idea. Like, was he into astrology? I mean, I guess the whole cult kind of mixed in UFOs and astrology and all of that stuff anyway. So it's probably some big thing that got let out by NASA, and he's like, "Oh, here's our opportunity." But it's just it's interesting that there's no pushback on that. But I guess if you establish yourself as the supreme ruler.
But didn't you say in the documentary that there was still some surviving members who did not participate in the suicide?
Yeah, that's who runs the website.
Well, who are these guys and how can we find them?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I would like to interview them if it's possible. I mean, if we can even find their names.
I think so. Actually, I think it's on. I think you have to, unfortunately, have like Max or HBO or whatever. But HBO did a 4-part documentary about Heaven's Gate. It's called The Cult of Cults, Heaven's Gate, or something like that.
Okay.
Where I think that they did interview those 2 surviving members at the very end. It's been a while since I've seen this, though, so forgive me if I got that wrong. But I think that they do appear on the camera, and then they kind of. Oh, actually, they do, yeah. Because I remember just kind of trying to figure out their psychology and philosophy when they're talking, because they don't discredit this whole thing.
No, they don't want to discredit it.
They still, well, no, I mean, like, they almost say, it almost sounds like the mission that was carried out was necessary, and that they still believed in the teachings of Heaven's Gate cult. So it's not like they, you see some people that got out of a cult or escaped from a cult that they finally have a revelation. They're like, wow, this was crazy that I was part of this.
Right.
But no, it's almost like they were still convinced that the teachings were
correct.
Were correct teachings.
They just missed the ride.
They just missed the ride. Yeah, they didn't exit the vehicle.
I got a ticket to ride. But they missed the ride. Okay, they had the ticket, right? But they missed the ride.
They still believe in the teachings. They just missed the ride because they don't believe in suicide. This wasn't a suicide. They're just catching a ride.
Oh, my Lord.
That's what
right.
Yeah.
That's what they chalked it up to, And another good way to explain this is the resurgence of spiritualism in the 60s and the 70s. And, this is when people started to republish Aleister Crowley books. This is when the book of the Satanic Bible was published. A lot of Alice Bailey books was getting republished. This was a time of the 60s and everything was a time of like spiritual revival. So that's some of this might be coming from that, Also, he was in college. So he was college educated, and he probably had been exposed to different ideas surrounding maybe astrology and stuff like that, maybe UFOlogy or something like that. And
some of that was coming from Bonnie Nettles. That UFO influence was heavily coming from Bonnie Nettles too.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like she was really the brains of the operation. Ultimately, I feel like she was probably the one that was more ate up.
If Nettles doesn't die in 86, does this happen in 97?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so neither. I think her death created this downfall for Applewhite.
Yeah. I wanted to show.
He was highly educated. I mean, look, he got a BA degree from Austin College, and then he got a MA from the University of Colorado. He was a professor of music.
Yeah.
And he attended seminary as well for about a year because he was going to become a Methodist. Is that what
pastor, he was raised?
Maybe? Yeah, he was raised a Methodist.
Yeah, he was going to become a Methodist pastor because, again, back to his background, his father was a Methodist pastor and actually established a lot of different Methodist churches. So that was going to be his footsteps he was going to follow.
Right.
But then he realized, I'm gay and I don't think this is going to work out. But he was into music, so he went that direction. And was actually the music minister, pastor, or whatever for, I think, another Methodist church before he just decided to go and teach it.
So you see, what happens is that he starts off, his path in life was on a correct path. But as he's seen himself failing and not being able to keep up with those standards, he then drifts into other worlds, and he's trying to hang on to his Christian belief, but he's drifting.
Yeah.
And then at some point he realizes that's not going to work. Matter of fact, the marriage with his wife and kids, that's not even going to work. Matter of fact, being the professor of music at this school, that's not even going to work. Everything goes crashing down when he meets Bonnie Nettles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it had already crashed before he met her.
Yeah.
I mean, he hit rock bottom when he met Bonnie Nettles, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is it's easy for us to Monday morning quarterback this with the internet and cell phones.
For sure.
You got to understand all this is happening before internet, before phones, before cell phones. You know what I mean? Before, like I said, whoever had the nearest encyclopedia was your source of information to counter Applewhite.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so that's what these people were dealing with, you know.
Yeah. So you're saying 38 people who committed suicide with him, they didn't have the access or the
they did in the 90s.
Yeah. The 90s. Yeah.
They built websites, and his religion starts to change. He goes from the two witnesses to, well, she died, and now this, and now all of a sudden a comment's coming. So now this.
That's the sign from heaven, right?
Yeah.
How they didn't start to see this in that 10-year window, being as intelligent as they were, making websites, I have no idea.
Well, I think once they were already so far into this and removed from everything, your whole reality becomes what somebody's telling you. And when their whole reality is, well, let's wake up every morning and go to the classroom and learn of the teachings of T and Do, our supreme elders here on earth in our vehicle bodies, which aren't real, which is just what we're renting for now. You know, they're not consuming any sort of other literature that I don't think that they are anyway. And if they are, they probably were discouraged to do it. So there's a lot of you do that every day for 10 years, you're going to start to convince people of some crazy stuff.
Yeah, some real isolation, and you're getting less exposure to the rest of society, and you're going into this cocoon, and what's going to come out is not going to be a pretty butterfly. I'm telling you, this is a cocoon of insanity after at some point. And these are, and just listen to these are highly intelligent people, but they don't sound like they're highly intelligent. Listen, can you play that?
So yeah, I'll play one. This one is interesting because, first of all, you can find these on YouTube. These are the Heaven's Gate. You can read it on there. Heaven's Gate student exit statements. So what that means is this is their final statements that they gave prior to them all doing the mass suicide. And if you listen to them carefully, I listened to about half of them so far. These people are convinced that, and they're willfully doing what they're been prepared to do. So they're willfully going about getting ready to commit suicide and catch the spacecraft allegedly behind Hale-Bopp. But I think what Applewhite wanted to do was interview them to show you like what we're doing now. If we're doing this is podcast / documentary on this subject. They wanted these VHS tapes out there so people could actually look at it and view the participants and see, where they were at and what they were actually saying.
I hope I'm not going overboard by naming these people, but Kenneth Copeland, Janet Paul Crouch, Kenneth Copeland in particular, Ken and Gloria. For a while, we were really thought that you were picking up on next level information. You were being a good instrument, and then you go off into this thing. This was some time ago. Go off into this thing where you're telling people that if they want to get wealthy, then they need to, give more money to people. They need to tithe more. I mean, come on. Where do you get this stuff? Your focus is wrong. I mean, I don't know. I'm probably stepping out of line here. Paul and Jan Crouch, you sat there and you pleaded to be the emissaries for the second coming when it arrived. You wanted to be the ones that had all the infrastructure all set up and ready to go and be prepared for his return. And did you know that we were in your prayer groups for a while? We actually did some of your accounting for a while. I mean, we were right there. And you've had ample opportunity. We even sent you a tape of the Beyond Human series. And what we got back in return was a warning about cults. I mean, T and Doe have tried and tried and tried to give all of you a shot that say you've been looking for this, but looking in all the wrong places. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on at all. I didn't mean to make such a, and I'm not singling just you out, but you were ones that we actually took an interest in for a while and then got disappointed. Hopefully this is not to criticize. This is hopefully to help from someone who, has heard some of this stuff.
Okay, before we move on to Questodi, one last question. How do you feel about what is ahead for us?
This is the happiest day of my life. I mean, I've been looking for this for so long. Some would probably sit here and, somebody on the other side of this camera watching this tape would probably say, what's going on? You all must not have a life, or you're deluded, or you're brainwashed, or whatever the thinking might be. It's hard to tune into. From my perspective, this is godsend. I mean, this is the answer to everything. These flesh vehicles. I mean, if you use the analogy of a car, and people may keep their cars for a long time before they finally wear out and they clunk out and they die on them, and they go and get another car. Or some people, they say, well, here's a newer model. It's much nicer, and this one, doesn't quite perform the way I could, and I'd like to move into this new car. Get rid of the old one, get a new one. I mean, that's about all we're talking about. It's not a big deal. I'm talking too long, so I'll pass up.
Yeah.
Wow. Something interesting. He brought up Paul and Jan Crouch and Kenneth and Gloria Copeland. Mm-hmm. Now, Paul and Jan Crouch were the owners and presidents of TBN television. They had the largest Christian television network in the world. TBN. It's called Trinity Broadcasting Network. And then Kenneth and Gloria Copeland, Paul and Jan Krause are dead now, but Kenneth and Gloria Copeland are still alive. Kenneth Copeland, of course, his ministry is quite large out of Texas, and they are what's known as prosperity preachers. Okay, where that's what he was saying. He goes, you guys, where did you guys get this ideal? And that we were once, and then he says to Paul Crouch, look, we were once part of your accounting team. We were right there and you didn't see us. Okay. So they're getting, what he's saying here is he's getting very disillusioned with Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, he's gotten disillusioned with Christianity. He's frustrated with at least these two ministry leaders. Right. And so he's chucking all of Christianity, he's chucking it. And he's found the light in this suicide cult, and that this is the answer. But he never really gives you a good answer on why killing yourself to get out of that car or hit the vehicle he's in into a new vehicle. Is he saying he's going into a new vehicle or I'm not sure. Right in there, he said, I think I'm saying too much. I think he's really confused at this very moment. He's getting ready to take his life. He's going to die that day. And this guy is in some kind of other mental mindset. Am I?
Yeah.
If you are condemned to death on death row, generally guys don't say, it's the happiest day of my life.
Yeah, that was
right.
That's why if you go and you watch some of these, it's actually really sad because like
very sad.
These are the people that actually went through with this, and you kind of see their mental state. It's a lot of everything that we've been talking about, but you can't fully understand their mental state either. But you can definitely see an air about them where they are all, collective consciousness believing of what they're being taught.
Okay, we have Thursody with us, and I believe that you chose the name Thursody because you want to be reminded of your thirst for next level knowledge. Is that correct?
That's right. My vehicle's, or this vehicle that I'm wearing is, pretty nervous, pretty scared. Not really sure what I'm going to say. I guess, what I wanted to maybe address more was how I feel about this step that I'm taking. And some may say, well, boy, it's quite a irreversible step. And I just wanted to say that I'm familiar with irreversible steps. And tell you what, I don't know if you remember Doe talking about that some students had proven to him that they desired to have their vehicles neutered. And I'm one of those students that did that. And I can't tell you how free that has made me feel. I've been here long enough from the time I had that operation to know the freedom that it offers me. And I'm just so thankful for that opportunity. And in all reality, I can't see that this next step that I'm prepared to take and am looking forward to taking is anything more than a clinical operation. And having seen the benefit that the neutering has had for my consciousness, for my ability to grow and be closer to my older member, that I can't see any other way but to fully expect that laying down this vehicle is going to be anything but great for me. And, individuals think of mind control or whatever. And I was in the class for 5 or 6 years, and then through my own ignorance and being attacked by influences, felt like, well, maybe I wasn't developed enough. Maybe I wasn't a strong enough student to continue. Well, being out of the world proved to me, being out in the class, proved to me that this was the only thing for me. And for the number of years I was out there, I would have been deprogrammed easily being out there in the world because you're bombarded so steadily by everything of the world.
Wow.
Jeez, that hit.
We've been deprogrammed, so they're scared actually that, it's not like.
He used that term deprogrammed.
Yeah.
In other words, so he knows he's being programmed.
Right. Which is interesting because a lot of cults, when when you analyze them, there's not a lot of free will. This was like they utilized free will, like, yeah, come and go, or whatever. It's like they utilized free will against them, and it's a really strange way that they convinced these people to do the actions that they ended up taking.
Do you think he also was regretting a little bit the castration thing he did, and then he's trying to put a spin on it and say, this was really the right thing, and now I'm going to get a new vehicle? Or I don't know if he used the term new vehicle.
Well, I don't think he used the term new vehicle, but I think you're right. There may have been a little upset about the whole thing, and he's trying to now put a spin on it because most people don't want to humble themselves and admit when they're wrong.
Right.
So they're just going to continue on down that path and try to rationalize it. I think that the first person you showed too was also trying to rationalize some things because he brought up the two ministries, and he also brought up, well, people are going to say you're in a cult or this and that. So it looks like they're rationalizing it because they're at that. We've got to teach people in society that humbling yourself and admitting when you're wrong is a good, positive thing. We got to stop this. This type of thing where it's like, oh, I was wrong about something. That's a negative thing. I need to keep that a secret, hide that forever. We need to change that in society. It's a humbling experience when you're wrong, and then you figure something out. Socrates said, I don't know anything about anything. When they asked him how smart he was, he said, oh, I don't know anything about anything. He was so humble in his response, and we've lost that. And now we're to a point where when you see these young gentlemen up there talking, that they're not going to humble themselves and say, well, I got hoodwinked, or I was wrong, or I regret this. They're just going to rationalize it.
Right.
In our society that we've built, this is where we're at. I think that's another important thing that we should probably bring back, is the fact of humility and being like, I was wrong. I had this wrong. I had this idea wrong, and grow past it versus trying to be flawless in everything that we do and never admitting that we make mistakes.
And I think you're right. I do. People, when you can come to a conclusion that you've made a mistake, or that's how you can then really grow to the next level. But as long as you can rationalize why you're doing or what you're doing, you'll never get out of it. You're just going to spiral down worse,
Yeah.
What else you got there? You were getting ready to show something, Paul. What is that?
I was trying to show you this, but I might have to show you a different way.
Why Nike shoes? Why purple?
Oh, I don't know what the Nike.
We never figure out why they chose Nike shoes.
Yeah, why was it Nike shoes and the purple blankets and stuff? I mean, we're looking at this B-roll. They're showing. I don't know.
I mean, unless there's something on their website that explains why they wore those, we never really figured it out. When I researched it, they just all chose to dress similar, and they even went out and bought those little patches. I showed them on my documentary. What do they call them? The away team or whatever it was.
Look at
this. Heaven's Gate away.
Look at this. You got 2 bunk beds. You got 4 people laying there with a purple blanket over their head, wearing Nike tennis shoes, and they're dying.
So did they?
So they're already dead.
Yeah, they're dead.
Is this their living condition day to day?
I'm assuming it is.
Yeah. So the what we're showing here, for if you guys aren't watching, you're just listening to this. We're showing the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. This is B-roll footage, so there's no audio on it anyway. It's just showing the visuals of how they found the cult members, like we were talking about before, dressed in all black with their uniforms, with the Nike. I forgot the brand. Nike actually stopped making this shoe for a while after this happened.
I would think this shoe, if you had some of the original shoes, because people save shoes and they're worth money. I guarantee you this style right now, if you could go on Amazon and try to find them or eBay, I would guarantee you that's a lot of money on that shoe right there.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think that's worth a lot of money.
So yeah, they're showing the living conditions. So this took place at a rented mansion, right, Bart? And Rancho
in California.
So they rented this place.
Yep. Well, I think that they lived there.
Yeah. Okay. But they lived there because you saw these bunk beds.
Rented a mansion for 39 people to live in.
And they set up these bunk beds in these different bedrooms. Yeah,
they've all pulled their resources together. They're making websites, and they've rented this mansion. This is a wild story, and it's kind of ahead of its time when you're incorporating humans or aliens from another planet. And I mean, I don't. This was a very original cult. I'll say that.
Yeah. So I was gonna play this too, just if you're listening as well. So this includes that B-roll footage that we just showed, but this is like a 2-minute. This is how it's like an anniversary edition, 20 years later of just a news story about this.
It's the largest suicide in United States history, and it has all the components of just being so bizarre.
It's been 20 years since 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult were found dead, their bodies discovered under purple shrouds inside a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe.
I just want to let everyone know how lucky and happy I feel to be here.
In exit interviews videotaped before the mass suicide, members appeared calm and full of peace.
We have no fear. We're proud and looking forward to what's ahead.
The fact is that there is only one kingdom level.
The cult's leader, Marshall Applewhite, known as Doe, also left behind a suicide message to explain their journey.
If I would title this tape, it would be Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth Before It is Recycled.
The members executed their plan by drinking a lethal vodka phenobarbital cocktail, then laying down to die, hoping to enter an alien spacecraft.
Mr. Applewhite, I guess, felt that they were aliens and that the spaceship had come to pick them up and that it was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet.
We spoke to San Diego Sheriff's Deputy Robert Brunk on the 10th anniversary of the mass suicide. He was the first to respond to the mansion after an anonymous 911 call.
Okay, what happened there?
I think it was a religious 30-minute suicide.
How long ago? Do you know about how long ago?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, and how did you hear about this?
I was notified by mail. I just thought I'd pass it on to you just so you can know.
The caller was later determined to be Robert Ford, a former cult member who had received the chilling videotape messages in the mail.
We might see you all again, and then we might not, but we hope that you remember us as we were, and not how other people are going to try and tell you that we are. And one last thing we'd like to say is 39 to beam up. Thank you.
I mean, that's an incredible 39 to beam up. So you would have thought there would have been 2 or 3 that would have bailed out on this at the end, but they really, I mean, nobody didn't do it, you know, and then 39 people calmly drank vodka with, what was in that?
I forgot some barbiturate, I think.
Then they put plastic bags on their head.
And then put plastic bags over their head, and then covered themselves up with a purple blanket, wearing their Nike tennis shoes.
Went to sleep.
And they kind of thought they're going to catch the Hale-Bopp comet spaceship and go through Heaven's Gate and get a new vehicle on the other side. I mean, this is an insane act, guys. This is insanity.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and go to Jim Jones. Hey, I know there was about almost 1,000 people that died that day. They didn't all commit suicide.
No, it wasn't that crazy of a story.
No,
compared to this.
I mean, they did inject this. They made their little kids drink it. They give each other. Some people gave people shot. They shot a couple people. I mean, you know, I mean,
they even practiced that,
they
actually.
practiced it. It was definitely a mass suicide of massive proportions.
Yeah.
But the story, as you're saying, Bart,
Right.
the story isn't as bizarre, and it's bizarre, but it's not as bizarre as this theory. This whole theory is insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not.
If only one person did this and believed this whole concoction, you'd have said that guy's nuts, right? That guy's absolutely nuts. There's 39 people doing this at once.
I did notice that Applewhite's exit interview, he seems to be talkative a lot more.
You want me to play that one?
You got that?
I just think that when you did play that clip, he was talkative a lot. He was explaining a lot. Everybody else was like,
I'm ready to go.
Except he had a lot to say, reinforcing his point over and over,
Well, I think that's it. Well, let me share just a little bit of that. This, again, these are really long. If you guys are interested in this stuff, just to kind of research a little bit more about it, all of this is on YouTube. But I don't know why the camera looks like that. But this was an hour and a half. This is labeled as evolutionary. This is Applewhite's. Oh yeah, this is Doe's final exit interview.
He is a bizarre looking. I mean, he's almost like an ET. If he really goes into a transformation.
So I think this is a good segue though. So we'll listen to a little bit of this, just so you can kind of get an idea of where they were at the very end and what his teachings kind of for.
Kingdom. And we're not talking about a spiritual body or some etheric body. Even though the identity that we have is with our mind or our spirit, not with the suit of clothes that we wear. I'll say that again, the identity. We identify ourselves not by the suit that we wear, but by the mind that we are, the knowledge that we have. We actually identify with that mind, not with the suit of clothes. My partner and I had to leave bodies in the evolutionary level above human. We had to leave those bodies in order to, in other words, set those bodies aside in order to come and incarnate in these bodies. Remind you again, we're not talking about at birth of the body. We're talking about we incarnated into these bodies in the 70s and the early 70s, and then helped these who had come for the specific purpose of this learning experience and helping us offer this information to others who might have some of that mind in them given to them from that evolutionary level. Now,
I can't even.
Do you hear the confusion of the explanation? And oh, by the way, why do you have to explain? Why do you need to explain this?
It's like a word salad.
And it's almost as bad as Kamala Harris's word salad.
Yeah, and you're right. He's circling back. He's really good at reinforcing it. He's circling back. He's telling you the same thing 5 different ways in 10 seconds.
Right. So that way,
keep
circling back. Enough. Yeah.
He's that way. If your mind went this way, he's got it covered. If your mind went this way, he's got it covered. If your mind went, depending on what he said initially, he can circle back and always keep this going. You know what I mean? It seems like he was really good at that. Maybe that's how he was able to convince these people and to keep them in this bubble by all being like, I'm going to say something, and then if
you go this way,
your brain thinks of it, I've got it backups for my.
All right.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, I mean, that's.
You can throw a roadblock up if you go one way. Oh, I can cut that off. If you go this way, oh, I got that covered.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's another way of brainwashing, and the media uses it on your phone when you look at social media of all sources. And Probably get kicked off YouTube for saying this, but
you
know, the Democrats are really good at putting lies on social media and just showing it to you over and over. Remember in 2016 through 2020 when we all, even if we didn't believe it, we all thought, well, maybe Trump is racist. Remember that?
Yeah, because they preached that so much, and then they created all the Do you guys remember 2020? How many 35 cities were burning to the ground, and it was called civil disobedience and peaceful protest. And the whole time they were doing it, they kept saying Trump is racist. I mean, CNN was really bad at pushing that racist card.
Yeah.
Well, I think all news organizations have a narrative.
To some degree, you're right.
They're trying to push their narrative, and they're probably using these reinforcement techniques in the way that they're presenting their biased news. No, and it doesn't matter what organization it is. It could be right, left, center, communist, fascist. It doesn't matter. It could be Russia Today.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're gonna do it and reinforce their points to where everything I'm saying is right, everything I do is good, and here's why, and here's how
they take. And also, they want to remain the seat of authority.
Yeah,
you know, you're the viewer. Whatever we say is the truth. You trust. We're the gatekeeper. We're the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of CIA tactics in this. I almost think that every one of the executives, they have a member of the CIA working with them because they use a lot of the same tactics.
Sure.
And I'm talking from right wing to left wing.
Right.
Media. They all use the same kind of tactics.
They do. Yeah.
Preaching their message.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and I think that's what Doe, I guess Doe. I don't know why the
which one was Doe and
I think that's Applewhite. The
Applewhite was Doe.
Toadie,
the Music Man.
Music was Doe. Marshall Applewhite was Doe. Bonnie Nettles was T. Is it Do Re Mi Tas Fa Sol La? Where was the rest of the guys? I mean, were they there?
Yeah,
I think it was a random thing that
T and Doe.
Well,
I mean, I'm trying not to make light of it. I mean, I'm just saying it's the most dumbest plan I've ever seen. I mean, there's nothing in here. If you're going to run a cult, dude, this is not the way you do it. It's the dumbest cult ever.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about this series, Cult Class. I mean, don't you think? I mean, it's dumb. I mean, it's the stupidest idea I ever seen. But there's other cults we're going to get into. I mean, we got some more to talk about in more segments. So if you guys are watching this segment of this podcast, stick around because we're going to get to them all, man. We got the vampire cults and there's all kinds of cults.
This one is very. You know what's interesting though about it, as we're getting ready to close though, but it's interesting because when you look at it and research it, there's so many flaws and there's so many things that don't make sense. But through the eyes of the cult leader, this was a successful cult.
That's true. Crazy. He pulled it off, man.
He did. And I think then when I did my documentary and my research, I think him and T were able to convince a group of people to sell their homes and all their belongings and give all their money to the cult.
Oh yeah.
So like Paul said, this is in his mind, he succeeded.
He did.
This was a home run.
Yeah, it was absolutely a home run. They threw all their resources. They sold properties. They made websites and earned money and kept throwing it all in the kitty. They all lived, very humbly without anything. He pulled it off.
And so much so that the succession of people that were, I think they were doing like 2 or 4 at a time over the course of like 4 days or something. And Applewhite was the second to the last person because he wanted to make sure, because he really believed this, he wanted to make sure that he went through it with it so that he had one person behind him to make sure that he also executed part of the plan. And then that person was able to kill themselves as well as the last person there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy. And even then, so with the surviving members, they still pay domain space to keep this website up. So
do they plan on catching a comet? I was thinking about the Halley's comet. When I saw it, let's see, that was in 19. Do you remember when it was in the 70s? Was it, or 80s? I think it was like 1986 or something. And maybe that's what Bonnie Nettles did. Maybe she caught the Halley's. Maybe she caught Halley's. I don't know. But I was thinking about that. Halley's Comet's coming back. I mean, it'll be back again. There'll be people probably, maybe, if time lasts, there may be people on this earth who have studied this cult and are thinking about starting another one and are going to catch the Halley's Comet.
Well, I mean,
it comes by every 75 years. I'd almost guarantee I won't be around to see the second. I think I'd have to be 99 years old or something to see this.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna have to come up with some better convincing literature, because this is
bad.
This is a rough idea to believe in.
But really Pastor, in closing, I just want to ask this question for the audience, right? And I think that all three of us did a good job with this podcast and looking at the things that we looked at, and then Bart's documentary, which is incredible too, like real short.
It's really
to
good.
the point, right?
Yeah.
From a pastor standpoint, and this is important, how can we discern true spiritual teachings from those that are deceptive ones, such as Heaven's Gate?
Wow. That was a great question. I mean, that really was a really well thought out question. How do we know? Well, first of all, you have to have, everybody's belief system has to have a baseline, a foundation in which you live your life. Everyone has some type of moral compass about them. You don't have to believe everything the same, but there has to be a baseline that a foundation which you say, okay, this is what I think is really the right way, and here's the truth. And I'm going to try to center my life around that and live as, what I can do as best I can do. And if somebody sends me a message or tries to lure me into an area that is just so outside of my norm and outside of the norm of most of society, that should be a warning sign. Okay. Say, whoa, that's too far outside the box. I'm going to try to stay within my thought process of what's right and wrong and what's life all about. Okay. And if somebody's tries to take you into an area that is just way off the beaten path, that should be a sign to you. Also, another sign is if anything somebody's teaching you is to end it in death instead of in life. If the teaching is about dying and taking your life or dragging you or causing you to be in bondage, really serious bondage, financial bondage, emotional bondage, anything and that should be a sign. Anyone that would say to you, cut you away from your family, pull you from your family, that should be a big sign. Okay. So, and as a pastor, I would say, start with the Bible. I would teach you to get with the Bible, to find Christ in your life, and then to look at his teachings, and they will not lead you into death. They will lead you into eternal life. And they will be about be good to your neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself, follow the paths of God through the scriptures, and get a good, firm foundation, and you'll be successful in life. So use the Bible as a guide and as the Holy Spirit. But even if you don't know Christ in your life, you have to build a foundation that makes sense in a way that it isn't off the beaten path. So if anybody tries to take you off the beaten path, you got to discern that. Say, hey, wait a minute, and stay grounded and centered, and stay focused on what helps you build your life, build your family, your freedom, and your faith. It should be all of these. Even in our Constitution, we believe that God gave everyone an unalienable rights to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it isn't to follow some comet off the edge of the earth. It's not to jump off a cliff. It's not to drink the Kool-Aid with Jim Jones. It's to follow life and things that are more family-oriented, faith-oriented, and freedom. I think those things are part of living a life that would be fulfilling. And I would obviously say to you, find Christ.
Well, I think that's just a perfect answer, really. And I appreciate I don't even know if you were prepared for that question, but I think
I wasn't. I didn't expect that.
I think you knocked it out of the park.
But really, yeah.
So, I think that's a good message to go by, and I think that's a good teaching, Pastor, and I appreciate that answer. I think Bart had stepped away for a minute, so I just pulled off the camera. Okay. But we're going to close out, so I just want to say I appreciate BC Begley coming on and joining us and doing a lot of the research and work and presenting us with that documentary. Go ahead and check. I'll put his link to his guest profile in the description below, but you can go find him everywhere. And then also, this is our first time doing this type of episode. We usually, as you know, do Q&A with interesting guests, but sometimes we want to talk about and discuss different topics that are kind of interesting, just on, do our own kind of thing without an extra special guest, just the Begleys here. So if you wouldn't mind, it would really help us out if you guys wanted to go ahead and leave comments, descriptions in the video below. But you can also do that on Spotify and those other podcasts if you're listening to. That would be extremely helpful to let us know what you guys think. If you like this sort of expose, so to speak, on cults. But and then if you have one specifically that you would want us to cover, I mean, we'd be more than happy to look into it and research it and talk about it.
I think that we do these cult classics review, but I think also mass shootings are going to have to be another category. Why people do what they do. So that's another category maybe. But certainly these cult classics is it's great. So yeah, it's good. And we want to hear from you guys, the audience.